After World War II, Ioseb was often seen in footage where he appeared to be sitting up in a chair at official meetings, including in front of the media. He was unable to move from the neck down if you look very closely at the films. He could turn his head if set down very carefully, but not much else. Ioseb formed a friendly relationship with another bisexual male who had admired him for some time before he was disabled. Ioseb, Stalin, did get to travel to Australia to see Gippsland in the end, with that man's help. There were a large number of photographs taken of him whilst he was in Australia. In 1953, after a disastrous 4 years where he tried to help restore order in what had become East Germany, after being asked to help specifically so they could secretly stalk him for Einstein, an attempt was made to replace him with an imposter. They attacked him and tried to kill him. It severely disfigured his face on one side, and he lost one eye. He was very temporarily replaced with a vague lookalike who may have had some rudimentary cosmetic surgery. The imposter ended up in one of Ioseb's offices, laughing like a drunk on drugs, whilst trying to rifle through his personal papers and office storage in some insane celebration mode. Even though Ioseb had been a quadriplegic since 1939, the imposter was walking around, giggling all the while like a celebrating lunatic. The imposter then decided it was thirsty and hungry, and ate or drank something poisoned that was in Ioseb's office in a giggling rush. Then literally dropped dead on the floor, from a standing position, with a thud that could be heard by staff waiting outside listening to the inane giggling. They put the imposter, deceased failed identity thief, made over, dead body on display lying in state, and people started pretending the real Ioseb, Stalin, was dead, where applicable. Some photographs of it look remarkably like the Joker, out of Batman material. The real Ioseb had experimental surgery to try to regain use of some of his body below the neck, and regained good use of one arm, and some movement elsewhere. He wore an eye patch for the rest of his life to cover the loss of one eye. Below is my quadriplegic grandfather Ioseb, Stalin, after lunatics pretended he was dead, 1953, compared to a selfie of myself. Unsurprisingly enough, Ioseb had my mother, his daughter Judith, placed under surveillance when she emigrated to Australia as a child. When she married my father Kevin on the 3rd of May, 1958 in Gippsland, Australia, Ioseb received intelligence confirmation and the usual copies of documents. My great-grandfather Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, her biological grandfather, was still in a Yugoslavian prisoner of war jail when my parents married in 1958. When children were illegally registered to my father Kevin at birth as if is in 1959, 1961, 1963 and 1967, all female, Ioseb received a copy of their birth certificate sent by surveillance by mail. He came to the correct conclusion they were not my mother or father's daughters. I was born on the 18th of January, 1972 before sunrise, drowned after lunch, by someone likely bred with Einstein's sperm, Slobodan Praljak, and then revived using CPR by my great-grandfather Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern in the Warragul Hospital when he was aged 82. Kaiser Adolf was on holiday in Gippsland with information about my parents' address to very casually check out, and ended up at the hospital I was born in the day I was born. None of the illegally registered females who grew up pretending to be my older sisters when I was born had Ioseb Djugashvili as a grandfather, only me. When I was born in 1972, Ioseb, Stalin, was sent a copy of my birth certificate by surveillance in the mail. He already knew the 4 older females in my household pretending to be my father Kevin's daughters were not my parents' children, via intelligence agents keeping my mother under surveillance. Russian intelligence agents still stay in Australia on rotation. When I was 3, Ioseb warned me he had asked one of them to take a hair sample. That if someone walked over to me or tried to snip off some hair, I shouldn't panic. An intelligence agent casually keeping my mother under surveillance decided to collect the sample for Ioseb and send it to him in the mail, to Kazakhstan. However, it was waited until I had been attacked when my father wasn't home, was seriously ill in hospital, with concerns I may die at the time. I was immobile from the effects, unable to so much as roll over in a hospital bed. He walked into the hospital ward, wandered over to my bed, grabbed a huge chunk of my hair roughly that lifted my head off the pillow, snipped it off with a huge pair of shears, then walked out slowly again. He sent it to my grandfather Ioseb Djugashvili in the mail, which came with someone else's intelligence report attached. My grandfather Ioseb sat with my red hair in his hand between his fingers, in tears, with an intelligence report saying I was in hospital, with the hospital staff unsure if I would recover at all. He was distraught and immediately started wondering if I had been hospitalized just to get the sample and try to blame him. Or to send the sample to him as a tease and then have me die after he received it. He sent my hair, his own, and some of his mother Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorova the Romanov's hair off to be DNA tested. It was to thoroughly check if I was really his grandson and therefore only legitimate grandchild. The results took weeks back then. Weeks during which I was in hospital the whole time, trying to recover so I could go home with my father Kevin. When DNA testing proved I am his only legitimate grandchild, he added me to his estate document in 1975, when I was 3. I was third descended beneficiary behind Auntie Svetlana Djugashvili, my mother Judith Webb, then me Brian James Webb. He came to the correct conclusion I was my married parents' only child in the household. Which caused a fresh questioning of who the parents of the 4 older females were. Ioseb had my birth certificate verified by intelligence contacts several times, including when I was enrolled in school and medical records, apparently. I have been regularly DNA sampled in the same way by Morons regularly so they can see if I am still me, Ioseb's only legitimate grandchild. My grandfather Ioseb Djugashvili, Joseph Stalin, died in 1979, aged 98, when I was 7. It left a massive intellectual hole in the planet behind. When he was confirmed as dead, his male children, my uncles, Vasily, Yakov, and Artyom, were already long deceased and all childless. His oldest daughter Svetlana was the first person approached about his estate. She declined anything he left her in his private estate, apart from cash. She took the hard currency he left her and officially declined to accept the rest. She died shortly afterwards, within a year of her father. She had no eligible descendants and was seriously ill at the time her father died, which explained her decision to decline everything except cash. Svetlana was very fond of her father, contrary to media dribble. It was very upsetting. My mother Judith had already been divorced by my father Kevin, where she lost access to his property and private assets after losing the divorce hearing. She got cash only, child support payments, and Dad was instructed to leave her 10k cash in his estate and nothing more. He had to prove it to the courts before they would give him his divorce certificate. It was a more important ruling than anybody really knew about. My father was an eligible Duke of Austria and Lord of Hungary as great-grandson of Emperor Franz Joseph I. When Judith lost the divorce hearing, she lost potential access to my father's Austrian and Hungarian Habsburg royal family inheritance of property and artifacts in both countries. My dad never received his Habsburg inheritance during his lifetime due to it being illegally withheld from distribution in 1960 when his grandfather Prince Sebastian died, the last Habsburg prince. All of Franz Joseph I's grandchildren emigrated to Australia prior to 1912 and became Australian citizens. My great-grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg was Emperor Franz Joseph I's only eligible and legitimate child. The Habsburg estate has been illegally withheld from my eligible Webb family since 1960. The Australian flag does not mean deprive any citizen of Australia that is officially in a royal family access to inheritance from that royal family until death. See the chapter, The Mean Nasty Australia Policy. Australia is not a secret deal to attempt to steal royal family inheritances and illegally distribute them to ineligible recipients, either. Even if people pretend it is loyalty to Australia's ceremonial constitutional monarchy. My father's brother Ian Webb, the Habsburg, who was eligible to become a Duke of Austria and Lord of Hungary when his father died, had already been murdered in Queensland shortly after I met him when I was a child. A bunch of crazy Hungarians with relatives in New Zealand were involved, then French Guianan, or French, lunatics, and it had anti-albino themes, via another 2 AFL clubs. My uncle Ian Webb the Habsburg's body was then molested after his death, with the excuse being he was a descendant of the old French royal family murdered in the 1790s. It was a very distressing few years. My uncle Ian was murdered, my grandfather Ioseb Djugashvili the Romanov died in 1979, my auntie Svetlana Djugashvili died 1980. My great-grandfather and predecessor Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern died in his house in Yarragon, around 7 to 10 kilometers from my family home, in 1982. Then my grandfather Duke and Lord James Webb the Habsburg died in Queensland shortly afterwards, which made my father Kevin a Duke and Lord. As a side note, my father, new Duke and Lord Kevin Webb the Habsburg, attended his father Duke and Lord James Henry Webb the Habsburg's funeral in Queensland, Australia. He left me behind in Yarragon for it. It was a long trip, emotionally stressful, with distressing behavior from the people facilitating the funeral in their employment duties. There was little to no polite professional behavior the whole time. My father was detained by Queensland police after the funeral, whilst quietly sitting having an alcoholic drink. He spent 48 hours in a lockup detained without an official arrest or reason. During his detention, he was loudly chatted about by the police lockup staff, so he could clearly hear them. All topics were covered, including racism, anti-royal themes, anti-Gippsland themes, anti-indigenous, etc. Including possibilities discussed about possible ways to end his life, seemingly at random. After the prolonged stay in the lockup, there was an incident involving police just before he was released. He never told me the details. It became clear to me, very suddenly, that he was also being stalked by lunatics for being a left-handed royal afterwards. He was very quiet when he got home. He had a quiet chat with me and told me that Queensland was a place he wouldn't visit again. When he tried to go into detail he hesitated and said, "It's your life, you can go wherever you want. But I prefer you never go there, to Queensland. They already know who you are."